Okay, so for the next project we did with Mechanical Cake was this idea of three different stages or three different movie sets. And this would then travel around to different events and conventions and such. So initially, we worked on the idea that the Maudeville would be broken into an L shape. There was a new one called Nick that would oppose that or mirror that, and then this new one, Hyde. Um, so that was the first concept. And then the idea changed, I think, because they weren't ready to bring out Nick, or at least work on it yet. That the Hyde set be built, and then we would just mirror them back to back. And so that's what we did. So we focused mainly on Hyde because Maudeville was already done, and I was given these concepts to look at. They had an artist draw these up. So this is Hyde's sewer layer. Hyde's under the London sewers. So you've got this old, mildewy, very wet and disgusting brickwork, but yet it's very solid, and the underground feel is dark and eerie and gloomy. This pipe was another major part of the design that they wanted. So we had talked about creating kind of a three-dimensional feel, and I wanted to push that. Maybe there was a drain in the back here, and then we could put that water pipe, across the beginning of that. So it gave it more dimension. So it's not just a normal, flat surface like the Maudeville one. He had another design here, which was for the ice cream cart, but I wasn't really involved in that. I think Jesse at Mechanical Cake took care of all of that, so did a really good job. So you'll see that at the end. So that was basically it. It was now, okay, what are we going to do for Hyde? So I started to dive into some reference material and research. How are these, arches built and brickwork structured? Studied a bunch of different ones like that. Found some pictures of some old water damaged and stained, brick walls, underground archways, how brickwork is done, some underground tunnels in London. There's another one, really more of a color difference in this one, and that's the thing, is that the colors really varied quite a bit based on the research. So here's another one. It's a lot more reddish feel to it. Again, there's dark bricks, there's light bricks. These ones turn kind of a purplish gray. You've got all of this water buildup and calcium and this yellow kind of slime. I found a conceptual design that somebody did of a laboratory because I wasn't sure how far, I would push the details. So, but found out mainly it's just the structure. Wasn't any of the inside details. And we also wanted to look at the top pieces. Again, would mimic the Maudeville with that kind of futuristic sense, the metallic 60s or 50s diner look, but this time with a more aged look. You wanted a copper feel. So we went with, aged copper always goes green. Here's another sample of some copper plating that's been aged. So those are just different things that I looked at. Bricks, the pipe, what a big water pipe looks like with the, the bolts that hold it together and the slime that kind of grows, not grows on that, but develops on that from water stains and leaks and things of that nature. So this one here is really the one that kind of guided me towards how I was going to build that pipe. So I ended up starting out with, where are we? Here we go. Starting to build the structure, the flats themselves. And the layout, again, was broken down into modules so that it could be moved around, disassembled, reassembled, and that kind of thing. There was 3 main parts. Actually, this got broken down into 5. So there was 2 on one side, 2 on the other, and then a centerpiece where that inset would be. So I started out just developing the first 3 center panels, because the outside 2 would just be straight panels, no problem. They would just get bolted on. So I started with these 3, and you can see the archways cut here, and then I've got the back panels. What I then did was I started to construct that center, that insert piece. And again, just, simplified structure, 2x4 framework because I wanted it sturdy. And then little 1x3 furring. And, it makes it lighter, and yet it's still pretty sound structurally. So just kind of went through that and built that center section. Again, it's offset, so it's set back about, I'd say 18 inches, somewhere around there. And there was that drain hole that we wanted to put in there with a grate on it, so it looked like water would be coming out through that drain hole into that area of the sewer. So this would then fit, and basically I cut that shape out of these shapes here. I just matched them up. I lined them up, drew a line, that matched on that circle. This structure was different because I wasn't going to take too much time to just try to make a round shape. It really wasn't necessary. I'd find the angles that I need and then just build that as a solid structure. The round part is the only part that's visible, which would be this part here. So you can see the edges, the sharp edges here, but those again are behind the front face, so they're not going to be seen. So, and then you can see here I had some supports that I added. I bolted together where the sections would be. This would be one of the sides. This is the center piece. So the center piece has the archway, so this would be center left. And that's how I did everything. It's the same for all of them. It's just 2x4 construction, 3/8 plywood for some structural pieces where the arch would be. These pieces that come up here, and then this is where that section is being constructed. So all of this right here, 2x4s and whatnot, 3x8 plywood, and then little boards in here to kind of support that curvature. All of that is the back side of this face. So this becomes that center piece. It's not very big, but obviously essential in the pattern. And then the back piece would then fit within that section. So again, just modular as possible and yet make it practical. And I don't want to make these massive pieces. So I used, I built this into 5s. These would be the 3 center faces. So 1, 2, and 3, and then there'd be an outside edge on either side. So this is the piece then fitting in. As I start to fit that in, and then I'll shave and fill and do all kinds of stuff to get that to match. I also built a structure in the back because that creates that depth, and I believe it was actually 2 feet, the depth of that. So you can see the inset would push in. Also, you can see that Jesse at Mechanical Cake was able to get some prefabricated brick patterns that we could use, because obviously it would take forever to make all of those bricks. So I was able to take those, staple them on, and then glue them on in certain areas and kind of fit the pattern together to cover the whole shape. Plus it's very lightweight. It's paintable, so obviously it saved us a lot of time. And here you can see the pieces being put together. trying to match up the brick patterns and where the seams are. Eventually the seams get covered with another panel. These ones will get hidden within the structure itself. And then I've got two of the panels up into the back. And a just very simple cutout for that drain hole. So you can see that inset idea where we're generating that more three-dimensional feel. Well, it is three-dimensional, but it's visually it's more interesting. So you don't just have a flat panel as an environment. And I created the upright with these sections here that I bolted together. This is at 2 feet coming back for the inset, and then the archway was bolted on from here. Again, separate structure. So these walls came off, these mini walls, and then this top section of the archway itself came off. Because again, I want to keep things light as possible and make it easy to assemble. So this is that archway that I built. Again, using the 3/8 plywood, kind of as a framework that I cut out. Matches the arch there. And then all the supporting beams that I, nailed and glued in there. Some support furs in here for the structure. And then it clamped on up at the top, bolted on at the bottom, and that's all that it needed. There was nothing else really necessary. So pretty simple design. And then looking at the arches, I could then pull this out, still have this together, but each piece would be separately marked, left or right side, top and bottom, number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for their placement and all of that stuff. So it was, well calculated. I hope anyway, but, they were able to assemble and disassemble it without too much instruction. So I think I did my job fairly well. Here's another picture of the archway. Here's the pipe being built. Again, I used just a tube and these cement tubes. Then I cut out some thick plywood to create that flange. Generated some little bit of spacing in between those to give it a little bit of a gap, rounded all the edges, and did all that fun stuff that you need to do to make it look right. Then I started cutting out foam blocks, and these foam blocks were all generated from just a big sheet of this foam insulation that I bought at Home Depot. So I drew out the pattern and then cut them out individually. Well, I had somebody else cut them out for me. And then I used a sander and sanded all the edges to create more of that brick look and feel. Some of them were damaged in the process, which was fine because, again, it's looking old. And then I pieced in some edges to kind of give that round the corner feel of a thick brick that would be used. So all of those gaps got caulked and filled. Everything got primed, and then it was all ready for paint. But this is literally how I built the arch bricks one by one. Then this is what they look like with the foam being filled in, primed. I added in some spray foam to get that kind of bulging grout feel and look to it, like the patterns that they had on the wall pieces. Some of it was excessive, so I cut it off and patched it and molded it, filled it in again. Maybe I used in some areas more caulking to kind of get the shapes that I wanted. I started adding in a little bit of rough textures for all the spills and grunge that comes down the walls, down the bricks and things like that. So there's a lot of this stuff mixed in to give it physical texture, not just visually, but I like to give that physical feel so it breaks up the silhouettes, and you can see the structure and the shadows that it casts or catches is so much more realistic in the end. So you can see the patchwork coming down. And then obviously this area has to get, cleaned up and filled, just like the caulking between the panels. So you can see all the caulking being done there. So still a lot of filling to do. I cut out some MDF circles for the drain, and here's the drain here. So then I mounted those. I put in some vertical bars, which are just big fat dowels, and sandwiched those between the two rings. Radiused all the corners and all that. Then I went back, caulked them, filled them, did all that, Bondo, clean it up, and you can see the pipe starting to take shape. It's got, more radiused edges. I've got dowel pins in there to kind of hold them in place as I glued those together, and then those dowels later became kind of pegs that I would mount my fake bolts onto. Here's the other side of the archway, again with more of this stuff growing within the archway. The other side has already been patched and primed and ready to go. The back side of the outsides were then built. So I built panel 1 and panel 5, and then Mechanical Cake wanted a bigger metal pillow panel between these two sets that would kind of block off everybody. So they could walk in through the doors on one and they could reach through the drain hole on the other, but everything would be blocked off so that, visitors wouldn't be walking in between the two sets, essentially. So I just built a double size panel for the edges. And you can see in here, I've already got the top section of that diner set starting. It's just a flat panel. I've got some 4x4s and some furring strips wrapped around it to hold it up, so that becomes the beam that supports it. Again, I always like to make it strong enough to support it weight-wise. Going back to the archway, I took it off and started to fill in that center, just stepping back a couple of steps, and you can see the ring here and where I put the pegs to hold it. They would match all of the bolts that I saw on the reference images. These are the bolts that I made. So I basically took a dowel and sanded the sides, and then cut them down and then sanded them some more to turn them into bolts. And here's the holes for the pegs, the little wooden dowel pegs that I would then glue these onto to make them look like pipes. And then the pipes, these bolts, I have thinner ones on one side, these thicker ones that I would create, the threads on, to simulate what a bolt would look like. They get covered pretty much with a lot of gunk and stain and stuff like that, so you really don't see them that much, but if you were to look closely, those are the details that you would pick up on. So here is a sample panel to show what the walls might look like. They loved it, so it was a go. So it's basically just, normally you could paint these panels if they don't have a lot of this lumpy kind of outgrowth of the grout. I mean, the grout was not set in behind the bricks or lower than the bricks, so the bricks weren't necessarily the highest point on the panels, and that's what made it much more difficult to paint, because normally you could just roll right across them with various reds and yellows and stuff, or whatever colors you want, some umbers and whatnot to get the brick colors. But since the grout bulges out in various places further than the bricks, that wasn't possible. So I could do it in some areas, but other areas it just didn't work. So I had to hand paint the bricks, and then basically roll out my color variations, get the basic palette set, then start doing hand painting of all the bricks, then painting the grout, then spraying, and then painting more grout, then painting the bricks, then painting the stains. So it was multiple layers in order to achieve such an effect for this, to make it look dirty and drippy and worn and old and all that kind of stuff. So I went ahead and started doing some of the other stuff, the other panels. This was panel 5. This is panel 1. Again, our support beams, 4x4 with some furring strips. They're the top diner panels, the ceiling basically, which he wanted to look like more like concrete. So it was a mix of from the brick to the concrete, and the post would become like concrete as well. So kept moving forward with that. Here's an example of the basic 3 center panels, what they look like with all the basic colors applied. Still a lot of grout work to do. You can see still I have to paint all of this grout work in between the bricks. So this was just a phase where I'm trying to get color on and trying to get the bricks to look like bricks, especially matching all my foam bricks with the plastic bricks, and trying to get all that stuff to look right. I got some primer on the grid, the water drain grate, and leaving some of my patches because I got to put some other colors in there. I got plastic on the floor because it's, there's a messy process, and there's water. It's everywhere. So here's an example of the next phase. You can see a lot more drippy damage. The grout lines are mostly all painted. The grate itself has got a base color. The stained areas and growth as calcium buildup basically is set. There'll be some nuanced colors that I throw in there and stuff, but you can see how all of it's starting to piece together. The only thing really visible is that seam line between 5 and 4. So, it still has to get some work done, but it's getting closer. Then I add in the pipe. I started adding in that. Obviously, what I did was I wrapped that cement tube in fiberglass fabric, wrapped the whole tube in fabric, and did 2-3 layers of fiberglass, sanded that, scuffed it up, added some dirt, grunge, bumps, used bits of patches of Bondo to make kind of bubbling surfaces and things like that. I don't know if you can see any of that, but anyway, it's in there, just irregulars. And then I mixed with kind of a somewhat glossy spray with some matte finishes where the rust is developing, and you can see where the bolts are. A lot of it's being covered with that rust, a lot of it towards the bottom. But there's a breakup you can see here in the sheen of the surface, giving the idea that there's been over time still, even though it's not colored, there's been damage to the original paint, the kind of glossy paint that would have been on there. So I've got the grate here is now painted. Again, got the basic colors in there. We've got some water stains and grunge pouring out. A lot of crumply rust on the metal pipes to indicate they'd been underwater for quite a while. You can see the bulging grout in these areas. So, getting closer. Here's another view. You can see more of the rusty bolts, as a part of that. Again, some of the damage you can see that comes off of there onto the top. Back here, I had a little bit more color, some more yellows and greens in here in the stain. Breaking up, I still got some grout color to paint. And just continue moving. This is the seam where the center section comes apart. So there was going to be a visible seam no matter what I did, but at least I kept it to a minimum. And then here it is disassembled. So once I got all of that together, made all of my changes, painted everything together, because it's always best that you do it as a single unit, disassembled it, and get ready to transport it to the set where they're going to kind of pre-fit it and test props and get some promo photos and things like that with it. So the breakdown was pretty simple. Only took me about 15 minutes. And then here it is reassembled, not by me, but by the team. And I just kind of observe what they're doing and give them tips. But it was just the 3 center panels for this. There's panel 1 was over here just in case, but all they wanted was the basic center panels, bring in their props, and get some shots for promo stuff. In the meantime, as all this is going on, I also had started work on the posts, like I said before. So these are the 4x4 posts with furring strips around the edges, just to thicken it up a bit, give it more of a stout dimension. And then I had this upper section that I wanted to put underneath the overhanging diner sections so that it had some strength in its support. I didn't want to put metal bars over the top anymore. I wanted the support beams to be basically all there is as the support, because it's supposed to look like it's made out of concrete or some sort of concrete design. So the heavier structure would help with that. And this is where they get put together. So underneath the diner section, I built like a little box, and this would actually fit into that box, plus it gets bolted in. So everything was built solid and secure and safe. So this is then coated. What I did was then coat it with flat panels of wood, glued everything on, bondoed it, and then started creating with some cement and joint compound, a mix that would become hard, kind of like cement, like concrete would be, and just did rough trowel work and stuff like that to create a shape that could have been designed for a purpose, and yet it's not perfect, because I wanted to maintain, again, that kind of visual information physically, not just with color. And then started painting, the base colors and washes and stuff like that to give it that kind of a cement look and feel. So those became my supports. Here's another picture, close-up of the color and texture, on that. And then outside what they look like. So these differentiate from the brick wall, and they become more a part of the diner section. And so I was doing that kind of at the same time as I was, building everything else. So, there we go. So then I also started working. There was going to be a floor deck or front porch sort of thing, but in this case it's interior, so it was just a walkway. So I got a hold of some real thin boards, and this time built it out of very thin, very irregular, random pieces of wood, as if they're just scraps thrown together in order to make a walkway. It's nothing formal. It's just something that he would have put down over the brick to walk back and forth over the little river section and stuff like that. So those are pretty easy. It just took some time. I had to take them and fit them, which most of them did fit together. They were designed to have a very specific scale reference to each other so that they fit, but their thickness was varied quite a bit too. So I actually had to take a ton of the thicker ones and plane them down so that they were all the same thickness, or at least close to it. So this is what the walkway would look like. So there's a little variation in some of those. There's a hole where the support beam goes, but for the most part, they were basically the same thickness because I planed them down that way. Then we had the sign, which was again major part of the set, and this time went with very thin kind of panel board, um, some trim that I just bought and cut up and pieced together for a frame. So it looked like it had a frame to it. The letters this time were all cut out of foam. So it was there's another shop that did that. It was can't remember the name of it, but they cut them all out of foam. Then we glued them on with the metal, which was actually aluminum again, just like with Modville. But I sprayed them with a paint that has actually got copper ground up in it, so it's actually a copper spray, and then used a corrosion activator to corrode that copper to make it look old. So it's actually really interesting stuff. And then just hand painted the background to make it kind of fit the period. This is a section of the cake word, but the mechanical's already basically done, and I got to paint all the inside of the letters and stuff like that. But here's a picture of the foam itself and the aluminum lettering that gets glued onto that. Now, we tried two different kinds of spray foam. The 90 spray foam by 3M melted this foam. Not the spray foam, the spray glue. So the 90 Super 90 melted the foam, and so we had a problem with that. It just ate it like acid. And then so we switched over to the Super 77, and that was slower. It eventually would eat into it, but it depended on how heavy you sprayed it on there. So we had to make it heavy enough to make contact with the aluminum panels or the letters, but we couldn't put it on too heavy because it too would also eat away at this foam like an acid. So strange stuff, and it was kind of scary running across that. So here you can see the decorative board that I used as a frame, all the lines I used to get everything organized. I got a really good sign guy who knows his stuff when it comes to building those signs, putting them together. Then we had the diner sections. So the bottom sections were already done, and then I had to reconstruct all the big rings that go around the sides, just like before. So again, it's mimicking the Modville rings, but I wanted to build the structure totally different this time, and I did it in a way that was much stronger, faster, and approximately the same weight. I ended up still drilling speed holes to save weight, and again did the same kind of material coating as I did with the support beams, because it's supposed to look like concrete in here as well. And on the bottom, same thing. So it's got that rough, textured, physical textured look to it. It's not just color. And then here's the aluminum straps wrapped around, held in with tape. And then I sprayed them, obviously when they were flat, I sprayed them with that copper paint. These are the markings for the wires to put in the neon tubes. Here's the aging of the copper with that activator. Here's all the wires that held the tubing in there, and this kind of textured cement feel that we had. Here's the bottom plates I was talking about earlier that help hold in the support beams, and there's a bolt hole that runs in there. So it's not just sitting there, it's actually bolted in, so I wouldn't do anything crazy and have it fall apart. So you can see the aging is over time gets stronger and stronger on this copper, making it turn green and stuff, which is really cool. It's crazy stuff. Modern Masters makes this amazing paint, this patina paint. They've got various ones, but this one was just aged copper, and it always turns out really cool. Here's another shot of the texture and the materials. Again, a mix of joint compound and quick dry, kind of this quick set cement in order to get not only the texture I wanted, but make it hard. That stuff is, you could hit it with a hammer. And then here's kind of a view of it sitting upright, so you can kind of see all the mess that's been made. And then the lights turned on. So once we hit this mark, we're ready to start assembling the whole thing. And yeah, that's where we went from there. So that was the top piece. These panels here were the covers for those seams in panels, between panels 1 and 2 and 4 and 5. Remember those seams I talked about? These would be covered. All you had to do is just put Velcro, or could have used magnets or whatever. I left it up to them how they wanted to put those on the face, so it would then cover those seams. So that was, for me, kind of an afterthought, but still it was an option how they wanted to use it. Again, it's supposed to look like cement. So and yeah, then it was, all the pieces were shipped out, and they took it down to San Diego Comic-Con, and there it is in all its glory. So you can see the pipe, the archway. Again, you can see the seam here between that, because it's just unavoidable. Even with the drips, you can still see it. And they opted not to use those cement panels to hide those, because I think it was dark enough in here, it wasn't that noticeable. So, I mean, I tried to paint it so that you wouldn't see it anyway, but I figured I'd give them those cement covers, just in case. So anyway, that there's the cart that Jesse had built, and then all of his props and stuff like that, and it turned out pretty good. This was a fabric that was glued on to the face of the letters, so no neon or anything. In the sign this time is much, much, much lighter, way easier to hang up. They enjoyed the process a lot more, because it was a lot easier for them. You can actually see Maudeville in the back here, the other set. So this whole structure took them, I think, 2 days to assemble. But you can see the copper, aged copper, and the big sign they had printed with Jonny Depp on it for Hyde, Ridley Scott. Anyway, so turned out great. It was well received. Everybody was real happy with it. Here's another picture. And yeah, I think it was another successful project, and I'm glad to be a part of it.